This is the Acts 2028 podcast,
where two young Church of God pastors
discuss the challenges and victories we face in leading revitalization.
I am TJ Samuelu.
I am Brian Seidel.
I am in an urban context in Seattle, Washington.
I am in a suburban and rural context in Boise, Idaho.
I am in a liberal state.
I am in a conservative state.
My ministry background is in missions.
My ministry background is in youth ministry.
And yet we are both in our first lead roles.
To help God revitalize the existing church in the Pacific Northwest.
We are helping each other.
And you.
To truly live out Acts 2028.
Well, TJ, here we are again, getting back together to just talk about life and ministry as we are in these churches and in revitalization projects. How's everything going for you right now?
It is going well. We are still pressing forward. There's hope. There's a lot of things, it seems like, here in Washington relating to COVID. We are starting to open up here in a week from today to phase 3, which feels like light years of where we've been in the past. And including yesterday, I got my first COVID vaccine shot. So in a couple of weeks, I'll get my second one. So yeah, things are going well in that front. There's hope. I had some people in my congregation, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later, but they were even moved to tears with some of that because there's been such an oppressive peace here. But I think you asked the question how it is, and right now the snapshot is things are getting better. And I think our faith is not in a vaccine, but in God, but just seeing that cloud starting to lift.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, obviously, as we have said, we are in very different environments. I'm in Idaho, right, in the Boise, Idaho area, and you being up in Seattle, we have very different. Obviously, different states, different government, state governments and perspectives coming from our different governors and mayors and kind of all those kinds of things. So yeah, our situation's been different in Idaho, but at the same time, again, we have the same thing we see in our church. We have people that are getting their vaccine. Some people that haven't been in church for a year that are coming back. In fact, we had like a older couple in our church. It was in church yesterday, right? And they were so excited to be here. And they're like, yeah, we've both been vaccinated. We're back. You're coming back in person. So definitely something that we are still dealing with here. Again, now our shutdowns and, mandates and things like that have been very different in Idaho than they've been in Washington. So, but again, we will definitely address that. But again, as we're stepping in today, our plan for today, and we know sometimes we stick to our plan, sometimes we don't, but right, our plan for today is to go back and talk about a couple of these issues that we have been brought up in previous episodes that we didn't have time to talk about. And then we stepped in again and talked about our mutual friend, Mel Snyder, this last episode. So again, to our audience, if you didn't go back and listen about Mel, I just encourage you to listen to that episode. Again, he was just a very godly man that is suddenly passed away, but had a big influence on both of us and on many others. And again, a big influence on the kingdom of God. So again, we feel like valuable listen for you. So if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go back and do that. But so we have looked at, again, with our churches, again, navigating this last year. And it's crazy to think it's been a year, right? I mean, we heard it on the news and kind of going through, but it has been an entire year that we've been dealing with this. And I think at the beginning, if you remember, nobody knew what to expect. Nobody knew, how long it was going to take or whatever. In fact, I remember it was a year ago shutting down. We were looking at Easter, which now we're looking at Easter again coming up, which is a major holiday for our faith.
Yeah.
And I remember some people saying, "Oh, this will be over by Easter, like no big deal," and here we are a year later still dealing with it, right? So obviously some people were very wrong in their initial assessments, right, of how big of a deal it was going to be. But again, in the midst of that, so we'll talk about how we have dealt with COVID and also, though, our online presence, which is very closely connected to how we have dealt with COVID in our churches. So because suddenly everybody was online. And so we obviously had to establish that pretty quickly. But with that said, right, is So how long, let's just start. How long were our individual churches shut down? How have we dealt with COVID? So again, if you remember, again, go back to one of our first episodes, we talked about your story. You arrived in Seattle with this church just right as kind of COVID was starting to ramp up, and you were there for just a very short time before you were given a stay-at-home order in Washington. So again, just again, how have you dealt with it since all that came down?
Yeah. So quick recap again. Yeah, we got here in February. So we've been here just over a year, and we had about 3 weeks before the shutdown. And I remember coming in that first day, and we kind of knew COVID. We'd kind of heard murmurs of it, obviously, at that point globally. And so I remember coming in for my sermon one Saturday, and it was the Saturday that the first person died in a suburb here in Kirkland, Washington, at a retirement home. And it was kind of big news, like, oh, someone had passed away from it, but it was an elderly person. It was right here in our backyard. And I remember being in sermon prepping and being like, oh, wow, this has been a thing that we've been talking about. So I amended it and actually put it in my sermon for that next day, not even, again, knowing, like you said, what the big impact would be, that we'd still be shouldering this a year later. So yeah, it hit pretty hard, pretty quick. And with that, we didn't even have an online presence. And so, our church, that was one of the things that we didn't have in place prior to this. And so it was really difficult for us to kind of just switch gears to make that a reality.
Yeah.
And so we kind of jumped in and we started to go to work on that on the back end. But one thing I can say is, God always provides. And we had a team here of people amongst a group of us that we were able to make it work. And we can talk about maybe a little bit more about how that whole process played itself out. But, collectively as a group, we've probably tried online church in every facet, like whether that is both worship as far as music and message together, separate pieces, one being live, one being pre-recorded, both being, we've done every element of that we possibly can to bring that to a final product. But it really was different. And so COVID created, a lot of interesting pieces for us right out of the gate. And so, as far as shutdown though, we've only been shut down 2 weeks. So we had 2 weeks where in about a 2-week window, we had 5 people from the church that, as luck would have it, I came in, or my family came in like personal contact with them, that they tested positive in a 2-week period. And so our quarantine ended up closing us down to keep us safe, because we have, some older people and stuff in our congregation. We want to be wise stewards. So that was actually not until like, oh gosh, probably that was maybe around December time. And so we had made it from, March to December with no cases, not being shut down, even with not having online. We switched gears and made it online the week that we needed to, and we've kept going. And so we were online for the first couple months, but really we've been back in the building for a while because of social distancing. We have a huge building and some screens and some capabilities where we can break people out into classrooms or gyms and auditoriums and stuff to make them compliant for what our state requires, even though it's been restrictive. So I think those are some of the first ones. We really didn't feel the impact of shutting down, except for those 2 weeks because of the actual documented cases. But other than that, man, God's been with it. Favor, whether that's been, running and doing those videos and stuff. But yeah, what about you guys? I know you guys had previously already had some of that video stuff already going. And so that was
Yeah, we did. In fact, but to say that, I think to your point, when you said, again, you showed up at Fairview and they did not have an online presence. And I think that was 100% true at Oregon Trail too. When I came here, again, they did not have an online presence. They had no social media. They had a website that like a volunteer had put together like years before, and nobody had touched it since. Right. And so I remember when I got here. Now, of course, I came in 2015 to Oregon Trail. And so, long before anybody knew what COVID-19 was. And so that was, again, a huge advantage, I think, to us, right, was that we had time to establish that online presence. But I remember having a conversation with one of my volunteer guys in the church that was willing to step up and take it on, because I saw that as a priority. That was one of the first things we did when I got to Oregon Trail. I said, we need to establish an online presence, because the reality is our culture is online. And so we need to fish where the fish are, right? Because you're never going to catch anybody, right? You're never going to catch a fish if you throw, no matter how good your bait is or how good your message is or whatever it is, if there's no fish in the water where you're throwing it in, right? So again, everybody's online, so we need to be online. And that's where, so I presented that again to church. Like I said, we had a few people step up. And the first thing we did was take down everything that was there, because it was all a couple years old, very outdated, like poorly done in the first place. And again, at that point, I just realized, and I stepped on the concept that no presence is better than a bad presence. Right. And because I figured, again, if somebody's going to Google us and they find nothing, then they're like, well, but obviously they know enough about our church to at least Google it. Right. And so, maybe they'll come by if they find nothing. Right. But if what they find is old and outdated, then they're going to just write off our church at that moment. Right. If they're looking for a church, they Google it and they see a 2-year-old website that hasn't been updated in 2 years and it's poorly done, they're going to be like, okay, that church, I don't want to go there. And so we started with that premise, is that no presence is better than a bad one. And so we took down everything, then we started from scratch and we started building it. Like I said, started a new website. We went through, and at that point too, we went through a whole rebranding of the church, and which all obviously plays into web design and kind of all of that stuff. But so we started building it at that point. Like I said, now our advantage was we had a lot of that was already built before COVID hit. And so, yes, we did. We were already recording our services. We already had, our website. We had social media platforms. We were posting our sermons online long before COVID. In fact, we started doing that. That was one of the first things we did, online presence. But again, we were just recording them on Sunday, then editing them on the next week and posting them, several days later. But we did have that presence, and so again, we already had cameras in place. We already had a lot of that. The back end equipment was already there, but we were not live streaming. And then there's one reason why we were not live streaming at that before COVID, and that was because I didn't want to, right? Because I had said, again, and even our team had asked, like, well, do we want to move towards doing this? And I'm like, nope, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're just going to record it and post it later. Like I said, and again, we were podcasting the sermons, and they were put on YouTube and they were posted on our website. And we had a lot of people that told us when they came to the church, again, that they had listened to a lot of sermons before they ever showed up. And so again, that was working. And I think then the reason why I didn't want to live stream was because I did not want to enable people to be lazy. Because I just knew, right, that like, well, if I don't know, should we go to church? No, we'll just watch it online. And I just knew people would do that. And I didn't want to enable that, for people. And so that's the only reason we were not live streaming pre-COVID. So once we hit shutdown, and I think that, so again, we were closed. We closed our church to in-person services for 6 weeks. We were down, where now, again, we were never shut down. I mean, we were still working. We were still, again, posting things online. And for those 6 weeks, we pre-recorded everything because, again, we had the whole system set up to do that. So we just came, set up a new schedule with our worship team and with our production team. And we just came on, later part of the week and earlier and recorded it and then edited it and then premiered those videos on Sunday mornings. And so that's what we did for those 6 weeks when we were completely shut down to in-person services. And again, and that was last Easter. If we remember, again, we were doing that. We did that for Easter. We recorded Good Friday service and premiered that on Good Friday. We recorded Easter morning and, premiered that show on YouTube and Facebook. And So again, so we did that, like I said, where we were, we were not in the building physically meeting for 6 weeks. And then our governor lifted the stay-at-home order in Idaho, and so we were in phase 1 of reopening, but he put churches in phase 1, so we were kind of exempt to all of those, restrictions and everything. But again, we were told to still comply as much as we could and kind of those things. And again, we were again in our valley, so our metro area valley of the Treasure Valley of the Boise area spans 2 counties, and so we're in Canyon County. Ada County has different leadership in that, and different mayors and that kind of thing, and so they had a lot more restrictions in Ada County than we had out in Canyon County, as far as like numbers of people that could gather, and again, how exempt churches were from those numbers and those kinds of things. So, but again, us, just like you, which I think is maybe one of the advantages of an established church, is we also have a pretty large facility. And so we were able to spread people out into other rooms and do some of that. Again, one of the challenging things that we heard from a lot of churches, even in our area, as they started to reopen to in-person services, was, what do you do with kids ministry? Right? Because kids do not social distance well, right? If they're in, they don't wear masks well, there's not, in that. And so, but again, we in our church, in our building, had enough space to where we could just spread out the kids into smaller groups in their different classrooms. And so we did kids ministry from the very beginning. We were open and said, yep, we're going to do it, but it's going to be different. And so we did that. But we, just like every church, we kind of scrambled to get those last equipment pieces to be able to live stream, because we knew once we opened, that we wanted to just continue to do services, but then we moved to live streaming everything once we were back open. And so we did, just like I said, just like every church, we kind of scrambled. But again, we didn't have to get as much, because like I said, we had all of the other production stuff already in place, right? We already had cameras, we already had all of that stuff. We just had to get the few pieces we needed to be able to truly live stream.
Yeah. And those have not been the case. So like right now in my hand, I'm holding my iPhone. And so for the first 6+ months, this is how we brought it live to everybody each week, was we just recorded on my phone. And thankfully, if you're static and you're there, you don't have to Zoom, you don't have to do those things. And it worked out pretty well. Since then, we've progressed. We have made some of those investments as far as a couple cameras, a new computer to help process some of those things. And so, again, very grateful for the team that we have to be able to kind of navigate that, including just, it's kind of like, you set forth on a project and you don't know what else is, it's the tip of the iceberg. And so since then, we've upgraded our internet at the building for various reasons, obviously, as well. And so we've been able to step into that. But yeah, we didn't have, I don't think anyone had a plan for this or thought that it was going to be this long. And so I think we really navigated that with a new perspective. And really, honestly, because one of the things that we had here that was difficult, that never got shut down, except for that time that we had, it was shut down for a couple days over the weekend while we cleared that COVID time, was our child center. So we've been serving the community, and we have anywhere, like on any given day, 80 to 60 kids on campus. And so we stayed open the whole time with that. We never closed down because that was essential. And a lot of our parents are, doctors or first responders on that front line. And so they still needed that healthcare. And so, like, as far as ministry goes, although it's been a trying time at times to have that, we lost our director for the child center, like within the first month that we were here. But we've been able to navigate that, and we've been able to do some of the best grassroots ministries through that, and meet families and love on them in a way that, because of the social distancing, we just haven't been able to do. I mean, prior to whatever they come up with here, phase 3, which is supposed to launch in the 22nd of March, it's like we haven't been anywhere close to this. Like, the closest we've been is you can have 5 people when restaurants have been open, And
Hmm.
that was for a time, and then even that got taken away. And so we've just been such at this level to where we're just trying to get back. And so, I think again, one of the things that's bothered me about COVID, besides the fact of just not really knowing exactly having a game plan, was that the byproduct of it, right? It creates this isolation. You talk about a family that hasn't been
Oh
there
yeah.
in a year, is I think that's when Satan is most effective, when he can isolate. And I think that's why, the word tells us when two or more are gathered in my name, right? Like we can remind each other of true north. I think we can all get in our head and we can all have those moments where we can have maybe a chicken little, woe is me. But I think COVID has presented itself in a way that has created that. And so, I mean, I guess as we still navigate through this, I would still encourage people, if you haven't seen someone in a while, reach out to them, talk to them.
Yeah.
If you haven't, you know, talked to a family member, man, this time's been precious. And so make sure that you do that. And yeah, COVID has thrown some wrenches and things. Like you said, timing wise, we didn't get some of those luxuries that you got in the sense of rebranding and stuff like that. I would say within that first part of launching all those, it was more survival. And
Sure.
um, I would say if I had a prioritization of a list of what I thought we were going to work at in the first year, it was anything but that. And, we talked to let in with Easter. One of the huge things that's a part of our church is we have this little place called Green Lake just down from us. And every year they have a sunrise service at Green Lake. And it's been an ongoing thing that we rent with the parks. And we have an outdoor service there at the aqua theater that they have. And I didn't see that the first year, obviously, as COVID had just started. And the city has already shut us down to where we can't have it the second year. So I'm sitting here now. I won't be here until my third Easter to where I might actually see a huge thing that's a big part of the community for us and what we do for Easter. And so, again, I think that's kind of where COVID and Easter are starting to overlap for a second time this year.
Yeah.
And just how do we deal with those things? And so, I don't know. It's been difficult. On some fronts, last year Good Friday service. How do we do that? So we ended up making that all online with a production part with songs and a drama so that people could participate in some way. But yeah, it's really changed things. So what did you guys do? How did you guys navigate some of those obstacles for regards to Easter and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think to say that is, like you said, we are all jumping in and everybody was kind of, like you said, in survival mode. And I think in a lot of ways we were too, even though we were more set up than a lot of churches were, it was still uncharted water. It's still kind of, man, we have no idea what to expect. We have no idea what's coming down in the next several months, depending on how long this goes and kind of all those things. That, I mean, I still remember like in our first staff meeting after we had this stay-at-home order, or no, actually, it was right before the stay-at-home order was given. So like, we kind of knew it was coming. And again, Idaho, we always joke that like Idaho is the last place to get everything. And the reality is like that turned out to be a good thing when it came to COVID because we were still one of the last states to ever get a positive case. And so we're like, yeah, see, Idaho's the last to get everything. But then once we had it, all the states around us were shut down, all these things before we were. And so we knew it was coming. And I remembered saying to our staff, I'm like, guys, we have no idea what's coming. We just like every church, we had no idea what giving was going to do. We had no idea what attendance was going to be like, what we could do, what we couldn't do, how long it was going to take. And so, I remember going around the room at a staff meeting and just being like, hey guys, like, we're just going to figure it out. And like, we just need to be committed to, to doing our jobs. And like, I mean, we're put here for such a time as this. And so, now again, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to pay you, but we need to step up, and do our jobs. And again, they were, and a credit to my staff, they were all there and they're like, yeah, absolutely. Like we're in, we're going to see what happens. And so that's what we did. But again, coming up to Easter, even as we all scrambled, and I think we did too. And again, our Easter last year was 100% online, something that we were hoping we weren't going to have to do, but we did. And with that though, I remember hearing, listening to different podcasts and all these blog articles and kind of all these things coming out as everybody was scrambling. I remember some of the experts, saying like, oh, we need to learn from all these YouTubers and how to keep people engaged. And we need to change up this. And like, I just kept hearing from all these different platforms of just the number one thing that we should not do is just record your regular service and post it. Right. And, because it's so different online and I just kept hearing that. And I don't know, just in my spirit, I pushed back in that and said, I don't think that that's right. And so we literally did the same thing we would have done if it was in person. And we just recorded them. Right. And posted them. Right now, I mean, granted, we did, edit them some, again, if we had different things or somebody really messed up, we were able to like edit it out. But for the most part, though, we literally just static recorded what we would have done in person and we just premiered it online. Now, like I said earlier, I felt like, again, pre-COVID, I said we didn't live stream because I didn't want to enable people to be lazy and I didn't want to do that. And so now to say, I'll admit I was wrong about that. We've seen God use the live stream in incredible ways, right? And again, now that I see how this last year, how God's used it to reach people, how people from even states away, extended family and whatever have listened and tuned into our services, even seeing now we have people that, again, we're a part of our church that had been transferred because of their jobs and things into other states that are still just participating in our church online. And they still say, they're like, Oregon Trail's our church. We're going to be online. And again, we have one couple that got transferred up into Washington. So they had to move for their job. And yet they're like, we're not leaving Oregon Trail. We're going to participate online. In fact, they're one of our online small group leaders now. Right. And so they're still serving, they're still building community. They're still doing those things from states away. And that's all possible because of our live stream, right? Because of that. And they're able to still be connected. So again, I was wrong about that. And again, I'll admit when I'm wrong, I will admit it. Right. And so I was wrong. Now, again, we still have people that I've heard from, time to time, like, oh, I just didn't want to get up. I just watched church online. I mean, some people have done that. And again, that I think you're always going to have that. But again, the positive reach of it and how God's used it has far outweighed, the laziness of a few. And I guess the reality, right, is like, at least they can still see it online, even if they are just there being lazy that day. Right. But the other feedback that we got, and I feel like at least for our congregation, of my feeling in my spirit, I think was proven correct. Right. One of those times I was right. Right. Because I heard from several people, again, during those shutdown times when we didn't have any live services, but even since we've been open, we've had people that have been online and we've continued to be in person or online. We have let people choose. We'll say, hey, we're going to do both. Right. You do what you're comfortable with. Again, no judgment either way. If you stay online, stay online. If you want to come in person, we're recording it anyway. So come, if you want to be in person, come and watch it in person. But I've heard consistently from many, many people that have said that they're so thankful that what they see in the live stream or what they saw in those pre-recorded services, even our Easter last year, that was 100% online. They said it was so refreshing to have something familiar happening in front of us online. Seeing the sanctuary, seeing our regular music, our regular sermon, the regular flow of our service, just being able to watch that. They're like, it was so grounding. They said, because everything else in their life was different, right? Their jobs were different. Their family life was different. School was different. Everything had moved online and everything was different. And they felt that grounding, that familiarity, right, of our service, of seeing our sanctuary, of the routine of the service, that they were used to, and they valued that. And they're like, it was very grounding. And they said, it felt like that at least something, even though it was online, it still felt normal, and that they really valued that. And so now, again, that might not be true for every church, but that was definitely the feedback we've gotten. Again, and like I said, we didn't change anything. Literally all we did was record our regular services and post them online. And which, again, like I said, was against kind of the mainstream advice, right, that I kept hearing, towards churches. So again, that was a major learning for us. And I said, that's all we've continued to do. right? Is we live stream. We go live and then we just do our service. And those that are here in person, they're here in person. We do that, and we have people participate online if they're online. But we have not changed our service because it is being live streamed.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And maybe a little bit, what has that done for attendance for you guys? I know that some people aren't gone, and a lot of churches across the way, because I think COVID has created maybe even another phobia that people didn't have before, right? So there's this fear of this virus or different things.
Yeah.
Like I said, it creates this foothold for Satan to have a part. But uh, I'll share after you a little bit. But like, what has that done for attendance wise? I mean, I know it's very difficult to track those that are online and stuff like that. But what happened to your congregation as far as numerically of those that felt safe to come back, and what did that look like during this time?
Yeah. So, I mean, like most churches, I think we've been pretty typical as far as attendance goes. Obviously it went to 0 for those 6 weeks that we were closed in person. Right. And then as we opened back up, we've just seen it steadily come back. And so there have been, again, we started off with literally just like what I've heard a lot of churches, 30-40% of their pre-shutdown numbers were here in person. But like I said, we've seen that just steadily climb the longer we've been open. And I say, we're back to about 80% of our pre-shutdown physical attendance. In the last several weeks, we've kind of seen an uptick on that. And I think that comes some of that to vaccines and, people's comfort level and different things to be more in person. Yeah. Like I said, I think we've just seen it steadily come back. But I will say the surprising thing about that is as we watch the online participation, is that our online numbers have also continued to grow. And so, which has been odd because we've heard what my expectation was, right, was as people started to come back, they would stop watching online. Right. And I think that's true. I mean, the ones that have come have said that. Right. And so you would expect your online numbers to drop because of that. And again, I've heard churches say that theirs have. Again, ours have not. And I don't know why necessarily. I think, but they have continued to grow as well, which has been a surprise. With that said, though, is I think we have the church has grown tremendously over the last year. Now, again, one of the thing is we also, in being in the Treasure Valley in the Boise area, we are, if not the number one, I think definitely in the top 3 of the fastest growing areas of our nation right now. And so we have people moving into our area. Literally, it's off the charts. I mean, I don't even know, where that's at. And so that has fed the growth of our church as well, just because people are moving into our community from out of state at record levels. And so, again, we have continued to see visitors every week in person. We continue to see, like I said, our online numbers growing. And again, I know part of that is because our area is growing. Just new people are moving here all the time. And in fact, that's, when we talk to people that are here in person, I mean, the majority of those visitors are saying, yeah, we are new to the area, right? And we're looking for a church. And so, that has certainly aided our growth through this time. But I will honestly say, though, is that our church has thrived through this last season as we have continued through that. The church has continued to grow. We've continued to reach new people online and in person. And I think we've seen that play out. And so, again, that's been our experience. And I know that's not normal. Like I said, I think part of it has been, but again, like I said, our physical attendance has come back strong. The surprise is that our online participation has not dropped off. In fact, that has continued to build as well. But I will say, I think part of that, and when you talk about online presence, is the quality of our online presence has gotten better. The longer we do it, our team's gotten better. We've improved our equipment. And like I said, we've decided to invest in it because we've seen God use it and use it in ways we didn't expect. And so, again, that's something that we have decided as a church that we would invest in to do it with excellence. And so, we've, again, our first few weeks of live streaming were not good, as you look at that, but But
Right.
that's, I mean, that has been our experience and what we've seen happen.
Well, and I mean, you can probably speak to this as well, but one of the migrations when we came off of whatever period that was that you were not meeting in person, so you described a 6 week window. I think there was this burden, at least from my behalf, of when we had time off or more people were coming and we launched a better platform. I didn't want those that didn't feel safe or that were going to strictly join us online to feel like second rate family members or second rate churchgoers, right? You didn't want them
Yeah.
to think like, oh, well, because they can meet in person, they don't care about us anymore. We're an afterthought. And so you wanted to step that game up, so to speak, so that they still felt like there was a value add to tune in, but also that they were an emphasis of what you were doing. And so I know for me, like generally when I go on now because we're live, I try to acknowledge those that have joined us today online. And, there's just little nuances that didn't exist prior to that, obviously.
Yeah.
But, I think, those are some of the things that was a desire in my heart. I don't know if they were in yours, was to make sure that those people that were joining felt still valued.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, and to say that again, like I said, we haven't changed our service as far as, what's included, but we have made adjustments like that as far as, again, we have our service host that kind of opens it up and welcomes everybody. And, again, we've added to that. They welcome those online as well as those in person. So again, we have added those little things into that, and to say again, just kind of the humbling moment is, and again, I've never felt that those online or those that chose to stay home, like you said, were second class citizens or whatever. But I did have, one person that even came to me after 1 week on that felt like that I did say that. And again, I had to go back and listen, and they asked me, they're like, well, this is the way I interpreted what you said. And, as we're home online, like I felt like that you were looking down on us to say that we were second. And I'm like, that was not my intention. And if I communicated that, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. And I said, and I went back and listened to what I said. Right. And I can see how they interpreted it that way. Now, again, I didn't mean that, but they already had that thought in their mind. Yeah. Right. And so then with that preconceived worry, right, that they were going to be perceived as second class citizens of the church, then I could see how they took my words to mean that. And so again, that was a slice of humble pie for me, and realizing like, hey, I have to be really careful how I say things and make sure that I don't portray that, because I don't feel that way at all. Right. But yet I think that is a very real thing that we have to be conscious of again, how do we truly include online people, in the community of the church? Because the reality is, right, like online's just not the same. And there's a different feeling of being there in person and that fellowship and that community that you experience. And again, it's very hard to replicate that online. And I think that the people that are watching on, for whatever reason, they already feel that. And so we have to be very conscious of how we address people, in the feed, and yeah, again, and even those extra efforts, like you said, whether it's reaching out through phone calls, conversations, whatever it might be, to connect them relationally to the body of Christ.
Right. Well, I would say for us, like I said, numerically, when we came, we didn't have a huge congregation going at the time. I think somewhere on bad Sundays, they would be 20 something, 30, good when they had a full people turn out to vote. I know, again, the number was 42. And I can say during COVID, we've had, we've had a couple where maybe there's been like some 30s, but we've also had some where there's been like 60. And so we've actually, like at that, we've grown 50%. We still have some online people. Again, some of those have, like you said, live outside of state and some of those things. So even if that platform went away, they wouldn't be joining us in person, but
yeah,
your bandwidth is still greater to where the message is being communicated. And you never know. And we were talking about this before we went on today about, if there's just the one, right? If there's the one that we reach that needs that affirmation from God, maybe you're just talking Gideon in a fleece moment, or they just need to know that they're valued, that they're cared about, that they hear that message. you know, it's worth it. All the effort, all the time is worth it. So, for us numerically, things haven't changed. Again, for that, I think I talked with I don't know what the numbers were this past week, but I'd venture to say they were north of 50 again. And even in our children's program, I talked with our volunteer, Joanna, who leads that, and there was 14 kids. And that was like unheard of before. Like, 14 kids. Uh,
Yeah.
we didn't have that many when we first got here. And so that is really cool that God is doing some things there. Obviously, again, like you mentioned, with all the follies and all those things as far as online and ability, especially in the first year of a pastor, I cannot take any credit for any of that. So, God's at work. I think, as we've been navigating through the Old Testament right now, because we're going through the story with our church, that main theme that I was telling them on Sunday is obedience. And I think that's really what it boils down to, right? Is just like saying, okay, God, how can you use me? Equip me, prepare my heart, prepare my mind for what may come my way. And, help me to be aware of my surroundings. Where are ways that I can engage with our community? And so, like, we're really trying to do that. In fact, I'm getting ready to head out on a pastor's retreat this week to go and meet with some other fellow pastors on the West Coast here. But uh, one of the things that we did that I had to kind of reschedule is our community council member that's here, that's responsible for District 4, where our church is,
Hmm.
set up a meeting with him. So, like, one of the things I want to be prepared for outside of COVID, like, we've been in this, like you said, survival, which is almost like on a reactionary kind of tale, because we got dealt this, and there were so many things, including rules and regulations and governments and CDCs and all these things that just we were inundated with. I'm now trying to, and we've tried this the whole time, but to lean in even more and to start to go on the offense and to find ways that whenever this goes back to a new norm, especially, we talk about whatever that means with established churches, that means some of the things that we did, we aren't going to be able to come back to, good or bad.
Yeah.
But some of those things we're just trying to find ways. So I'm trying to solicit, those in our community. And one of the things that I've wrestled with is, in being shut down for 6 weeks or otherwise, kind of puts this in the forefront, is if we cease to exist, would our community still miss us? Would they know? And I think on some levels, I could answer that honestly and truthfully, that the families that come here every day that I described in our child center, they would feel the impact of that. But
Yeah.
would the people that are in our community, like our next door neighbors, would they say, I don't know. I don't know if they help or what that would be. I want them to say, hey, look, even if I don't have the same belief system as them, they are a vital part of our community and they help and they're a great neighbor. Maybe even if they use that term, they love their neighbor as themselves. I don't know that they would, but if they did, that they would say, even if I don't believe what they do, I don't want to see them fail because they are a huge part of our community. And
Yeah.
so, man, I numerically, if we don't grow, more than what we already have, but we are effective people for kingdom, uh, I'm okay with that. I'm not here in a big city like Seattle where we can have, probably, you could probably get 1,000 people, just like you said, people moving in numerically. Apparently I'm an anomaly since I moved out of there to here. Maybe
Yeah.
that's why the U-Haul was so cheap coming this way, because
Yeah.
I did them a favor by
Probably.
turning it. But there's those things that really, God, I think, can use. And so I would encourage people, as we navigate through these next phases and next things, as things start to reopen, um, don't necessarily just wait for them, because I think if we wait, it's going to be too late. But I would encourage you to go on the offense and start to find ways, so when those things do open, that you can capitalize, that you'll be there to meet that need, and that you'll be able to, term I use, be the hands and feet of Christ, right? That you'd be
Yeah.
there to answer that call, not just reactionary. Because I feel like that's been the hardest. Sitting on your hands is so difficult. And I I'm not a big part of the part, but I think it was like Mike Tyson, a boxer, that was like everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, right? So like let's not be on that part as a church. Like let's allow God to work in us and through us. And part of that is on these downtimes is that we've connected with him, that we have a solid foundation so that we can usher that in. So if like you said, whether that's sleeping in and being lazy in that context, or just the fact that we were lazy in putting on our armor of God and showing up and having fellowship and community with not only our church, but that union with God, man, I would encourage people to start stepping into that now, like yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just what you said is again, we need to move out of survival and move to how are we going to thrive, right? Because the reality is we are never going back to pre-COVID, right? Everybody says, oh, going back to normal. There is not, we're not going back there. There's going to be a new normal, right? But because we realize, right, that COVID has really opened our eyes to what I think has been useful, right? And maybe things that were kind of dead weight, right? And so I think as we do move back to reopening and finding what the new normal is going to be, I would just encourage every church leader, even every follower of Jesus, when you think about your life, what should I put back in? Right? Because there were some things in our churches, there were some things in our faith journey that just weren't helping anybody. Right. So again, and now it's all, we have kind of a clean slate in a lot of ways. And so now as we kind of build it back in to find this new normal, let's be strategic in what we're putting back in. And again, ask some of those questions, like you said, of, man, what is our church really doing for our community? What is the reputation of our church, and what can we do to improve that as we reopen, as we add things back in? Maybe we should realize that we were just too busy doing stuff and we weren't really ministering, right? And because suddenly the calendar got clear, right? When no matter what state you're in, no matter what the local regulations were, everybody's calendar, stopped at one point. And so now we can strategically put things back in to better accomplish the mission that God has called us to.
Yeah. Well, and just simple things, right? Like even I'm a hugger. Like that was a part of the thing. Like I would greet people that way. I want to help be a catalyst for change to kind of make those things kind of come back. But you know what? Like we have to be a light in remembering God gave us a book and his people went through some crazy stuff that, we're talking pandemic. They went through plagues. They went through all sorts of things, right? Like,
yeah.
And yet they still survived and God still had a plan for them. And I was talking to our church about this is like, we get inundated right now in these times, and COVID's created this like where we can't focus. And like you said, calendars you just led with, like we can't even plan like a month in advance because we don't know what even tomorrow may hold. But I would encourage people to remind them that God plays the long game. And even when it doesn't make sense, like he doesn't, like we get inundated like with how are we going to do this? How are we going to get online? How are we going to have all these things? But God is the type of God that has, not only because he's the creator, but he has this long-term plan that he's not surprised by this. He's not caught off guard. In fact, he's the kind of guy that in the midst of when things are completely terrible, like right now, he will play the long game and send a child and raise them up to free his people like Moses. He's the God that will send his son as a babe through Mary that will grow up and die for atonement for all of us and our whole new covenant that we can, so like he's playing the long game. And so like, I would just encourage people right now, not to lose hope right now in the midst of this, like right in front of us moment, but like, remember that God has a plan and he's playing the long game. And even though it doesn't seem like it makes sense, like when Pharaoh's killing all of the babies, like God still had a plan for Moses. God still has a plan for us. And that's what gives us hope. Like our hope isn't in this vaccine that we're going to get out of this someday and be like, oh yes, we have. No, like God is our eternal hope. And so like he's playing the long game. He has a plan. And so I was telling our congregation that, but I mean, I'm preaching the choir as far as you, but hopefully that's reaching somebody that needed that message because, we get frustrated. We lose focus. Perspective just needs to be changed a little bit, but
Yes.
yeah, God's got this.
Amen. I agree. So speaking again, God's got a plan, and we also have a plan for this podcast. One of our plans, right, is that we are going to bring in some special guests from time to time.
Yeah.
So again, our next episode we have planned, we are going to have an interview with our general director for Church of God Ministries, Jim Lyon. And so he's going to come in again. He's going to be with us. He will be our first interview. And again, we both know him personally, and he has personal ties to both of our churches. So we will get to hear from him on that. So make sure, again, look forward to our next episode as we have our first interview with General Director of Church of God Ministries, Jim Lyon. Until next time, right? Keep pressing on, TJ.
All right. God bless you guys.
Acts 20:28. So guard yourselves and God's people. Feed and shepherd God's flock, his church, purchased with his own blood, over which the Holy Spirit has appointed you as leaders. The Acts 2028 podcast is a broadcast production of In His Grip Publishing. Our theme music is Achievement by Giovanni Bruno. We'd love to hear from you on our social media accounts or through email. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram at Acts 2028 Podcast, or send us an email at acts2028podcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, leave us ratings and reviews, and even give us your email so you can be notified of new episodes. Thank you for listening, and until next time, we hope that you will lead wherever God has put you, and together we can all live out Acts 2028 as we serve in the established church.